What's up, guys? This is Jay from COI. So today, everyone is talking about a Ukrainian plane that went down in Iran. Now, there are conflicting reports about the plane going down. It was, as far as I know, a Boeing 737, and I have intelligence that has said the 737 has horrible problems. Just recently, within the last few days, they discovered an electrical problem that is actually going to slow down many of the manufacturers making them right now. It's a huge problem for Boeing. Um, yes, other issue and possibly malfunction evidence we have that it just went down was the fact that the plane turned off of its flight pattern right before it went down. It made a very interesting turn, and Iran is saying that they were turning back towards the airport. It's highly, highly possible. Justin Trudeau in Canada and America are all saying the same thing, that they believe Iran shot it down, and they shot it down by accident. Their proof for that is a missile, a ground-to-air missile that was Ukrainian, actually, that Iran would have got through Russia and Putin, and possibly through Ukraine at some point as well. Obviously by proxy through Ukraine, but maybe directly from Ukraine. There hasn't been a lot of information on it. In fact, the images that we see with that missile in there, it hasn't even really been verified if it's a real picture. Now, granted, I actually believe it probably is. I I wouldn't be shocked if I found out that it was a mechanical malfunction and that's why the plane went down. I really wouldn't be shocked. But I do at this point believe that it was Iran who shot down the plane. I believe it because if you're Iran and it's an hour after you sent 12 ballistic missiles to military bases in Iraq, and even though it was kind of a weak wristed punch that they threw, it was a very pampered and precise strike that harmed nobody. You still don't know if America knows you did that on purpose. And you have somebody flying in your airspace. So you target them and you shoot it. Namely because America and our troops really kick ass at paratrooping. That's what we're really, really good at. We're good at a lot of stuff, don't get me wrong, but our military is fantastic at dropping in the middle of the shit, so to speak, and fighting their way out, creating a base of their own. And it would be perfect for them to stop in and take over a Iranian airport. That gives them really, really good strategic foothold. And that most likely is what Iran thought and shot it. Unfortunately, killing over 170 people. The thing to make note of, though, is that while um, a majority were Ukrainian, the second number of people was Iranian, with about 80 Iranians on the plane. So that's why I do believe it was also a mistake and wasn't done out of vengeance. Is I mean, they killed 80 of their own people. Justin Trudeau, who there was about half, I believe, of that Canadian, um, felt like he had to respond because of his people being in that plane. Ultimately, the thing that we have to realize is it doesn't matter who it was. It doesn't matter if it was America, it doesn't matter if it was Iran, Canada, UK, whoever, because it's going to happen again. It's going to happen again because we keep doing this. We amp up tension, we get in these situations where things are just about to burst, and then something always does. And they consider this a misfire. Ah, it was an accident. It wasn't a misfire when civilians die. And unfortunately, in all of these situations. Every time that tension gets up, civilians die. Soldiers are prepared. Civilians aren't. Civilians are on their way to work, and their car blows up. They get stuck in a town square, and a U.S. soldier opens fire and kills them. They're flying in an airplane to go home, and an Iranian missile shoots them. This happens all the time. And that's why it doesn't matter who did it. The important thing is it needs to stop. Donald Trump, the Ayatollah, Justin Trudeau, goddamn Cookie Monster, who's ever in charge of a country needs to realize that their rhetoric is incredibly important. And, there's that whole saying that it's like your wife thinks that you can read her mind. World leaders need to understand the same thing. You can't read each other's mind. They don't know how tense it's going to get, how close we're going to get to midnight. When is the war going to start? And if they both just stop trying to measure their dicks and actually sit down and practice diplomacy, innocent people would stop being killed as often. And when it did happen, it would be a truly tragic, rare event. Instead, it's just a tragic event that happens quite often. Now, the only reason why we notice this one so much is because it happened right during a very tense moment, and it happened to people who they're kind of not over there. They're in the middle, and some of them are Canadians, which is, God, that's almost American. So that's why we're paying attention. But it happens by the hundreds, by the thousands every year. We just don't hear about it or see it or care. Now, Congress, on the other hand, they did try to sign a War Powers Resolution Act in today, and they were successful. They were successful in passing a bill that doesn't require Donald Trump to do anything, and actually doesn't do anything. Nancy Pelosi said on this bill, she said, well, even though this doesn't require any actions from the president and really doesn't specify any actions that he's supposed to take, I believe this bill still has teeth because it expresses our message. Really, Nancy? You really think it still has teeth even though it doesn't require him to do anything? It was completely pointless. But even the mere thought of this bill coming up made people like Lindsey Graham just throw his hands up in the air, wave a fan in front of him, and be just completely insulted. As he said, aside from his usual rhetoric of just being offended by, oh my God, the Democrats, he also said that this Resolutions Powers Act is unconstitutional. And the important thing to take away from it is that Lindsey Graham is ignorant. He's either ignorant or purposely lying to you, either one, because it's not unconstitutional. In fact, Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution stipulates that Congress shall have power to declare war, grant letters of marque or reprisal, rules concerning captures of land or water, and raising support of armies, and also to make rule for the government and regulations of the land and naval forces. Lindsey Graham does not know the Constitution. He says that he jacks off to every night. Surprise, surprise. Again, this was to try to appease people who are anti-war. I'm with Lindsay on it, to be honest. I don't agree that it's unconstitutional, but I believe it was a waste of time and did nothing besides make it look like they were going to do something. But again, this comes from a group like the Democrats led by Nancy Pelosi, who is been paid by the same defense contractors as everyone else. And her too has been in on not only the endless wars that we've had, but the torturing of people we've captured who we suspected were terrorists, and none of them have turned out to be terrorists, by the way. Some of them are still in Guantanamo Bay right now. And Nancy Pelosi was all part of that. So do I really believe she gives two shits about war and who dies? No, of course not. As long as she's still getting rich. It's all the same team. And that's why, unfortunately, with this situation with this plane, nothing's going to change and nothing will. The rich make too much money off of it. And look, the only thing that they really have to lose is our lives. They don't care about that. It doesn't affect them. We reproduce all the time anyway. That's what poor people do, right? Meanwhile, they sit in their Scrooge McDuck type vaults counting all their money and passing it on to their half inbred, half incoherent children. Well, look, all we have to do is go out and die for them, right? Anyway, that's my thought on the whole thing. We'll learn more in the future, or we won't. One thing I will say is all the people who love the rhetoric of it's about time we go to war and boots on the ground and all those great mantras you hear all the time, understand that those mantras also cause these incidences to happen. They cause the tensions to rise as well. It makes people like the warmongering Lindsey Graham and Dick Cheney and Donald Trump, although it's not fair to call Donald Trump a warmonger, but Bush, Obama, it makes them say, look, the Americans are behind us. Our people are ready for war. And it's dangerous rhetoric. It's awful rhetoric because it leads to civilians dying. Maybe you're ready for boots on the ground. Is your daughter? Is your nephew? Your uncle? Is somebody halfway around the world who did nothing ready for it? One thing I will say before I leave. The first time I remember really caring about someone who I really had no idea who they were was when I was 17 years old. I know, it's pretty late in life. It's a pretty heartless bastard through my life. No, to the point where it still affects me, and I still think about it, is I remember seeing pictures of the first Iraq War. And at this point, I had a nephew who was 4 years old, and he loved Sonic the Hedgehog, like adored Sonic the Hedgehog. Um, Always had Sonic the Hedgehog shirts, which was really hard to find back then, because this was like 2000, you know? Retro hadn't really came back yet. And I was looking through a magazine, and it showed some of the images of these people who were bombed and killed, and almost all of them were civilians. And one of them was a little Iraqi boy who was probably 3 or 4, and he was wearing a Sonic the Hedgehog shirt, and it broke my heart. And that's why I get mad, and that's why I'm sarcastic about how little these people give a shit, because they see it all the time, and they don't care. Meanwhile, all we do is die. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys. You have a good evening.